Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into the deep green hush of an old European forest. The kind of place where the air itself feels layered. Pine resin above, damp soil below, and something in between that smells a little like yesterday's rain clinging to moss. You wander here with me, shoulders loose, every crunch of a fallen twig echoing far louder than it should. You can almost hear the forest rolling its eyes at your clumsy footsteps. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this. At least, not without carrying home a story that refuses to leave you alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love knowing just how far across the world these sleepy adventures travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The last color of the evening sky seeps through the branches, bruised purples, a streak of orange, then quickly swallowed by deepening blue. Your breath fogs faintly, though the night is mild, and the hush of the woods feels like the forest is leaning in, waiting for you to provide the soundtrack. Somewhere, an owl rehearses the same 3 notes it's been singing since Rome was still bickering about aqueducts. And in a very real way, that's true. Owls are ancient participants in human myths, symbolizing wisdom for the Greeks, omens for the Romans, and occasionally the kind of creature that might snatch your hat if you wander too close. You wander on, half alert, half lulled by the rhythm of your own boots. The path is soft underfoot, cushioned by years of needles and leaves, and you feel that odd mixture of peace and suspicion that comes whenever nature grows too quiet. Folklorists like to point out that in European stories, forests often play this role, the space between ordinary life and transformation. Villages and hearths are safe, forests are where the boundaries blur. And, in case you're wondering, scholars still debate whether these tales originally warned children away from danger or invited listeners to find a sense of wonder. Either way, here you are, walking straight into the metaphor. Somewhere up ahead, the soft, repetitive thud of an axe taps at the air. Not hurried, not angry, just a steady beat, as if marking time. You follow it the way one follows the smell of coffee in a sleepy airport. Eventually, you glimpse him, a woodcutter, lean from years of work, shirt patched in more places than you can count, swinging his axe with the kind of calm precision that suggests he's been at this longer than you've been alive. His shoulders roll in smooth arcs, wood chips scattering like confetti for a celebration no one else attended. It would be easy to dismiss him as a background character in someone else's tale, like the helpful NPC who sells rope and onions. But here, tonight, he's the main act. His rhythm fills the clearing, every chop echoing against the trunks. This is his life. Chop, stack, haul. A routine so simple that you wonder if it ever feels like a form of meditation. And honestly, doesn't chopping wood have the same repetitive calm as scrolling social media? Except, of course, it actually produces warmth instead of stealing your sleep. You lean against a mossy log, watching him. The fireflies come out slowly, like lazy stagehands testing the lights before the play begins. Somewhere in the distance, water trickles. Maybe a brook. Maybe the kind of stream where fairy tale heroes inevitably lose their reflection. You catch yourself yawning, not from boredom, but from the soothing monotony of it all. It's the kind of scene that makes you forget that stories are supposed to involve conflict. Still, in folk tales, woodcutters carry symbolic weight. They're often the bridge between civilization and wilderness, the ones who shape the forest into firewood, yet rely on its mercy to survive. Some scholars even argue the woodcutter is a stand-in for the listener, carving meaning out of the unknown. Others say he's just, well, a guy with an axe. See, even academics can't agree whether he's Jungian archetype or glorified lumberjack. For now, you watch him, content to be an unseen observer. His axe thuds, his pile grows, and the evening deepens into a darker shade of blue. But there's something in the air, like the forest is holding its breath, and maybe you are too, because sooner or later, something always shifts.
The woodcutter's routine continues as though time itself bends around him. Each swing of the axe lands with the kind of certainty you only get from doing the same motion 10,000 times. Wood splits cleanly, halves falling neatly into a growing pile that smells sharp and resinous, like a fresh box of pencils you weren't supposed to chew on in school but absolutely did. The rhythm is hypnotic. Lift, swing, crack. Lift, swing, crack. You start matching your breathing to it without realizing, the way you sometimes unconsciously tap your foot to background music in a grocery store. His face is worn, lines etched deep by sun and wind. Not the kind of lines you'd see on a city worker hunched at a desk, but grooves carved by weather and labor. His beard is more patchwork than thick, the kind that says, "I'd grow a legendary beard if I didn't spend half my time too busy to notice." He pauses only to wipe his brow, leaning the axe against the log, shoulders rising and falling with that heavy, satisfied sigh of someone who's mastered being ordinary. And yet, fairy tales love to mess with people like this. Ordinary men and women, grinding through their days, suddenly stumble on magic, not because they asked for it, but because life has a mischievous sense of timing. Folklorists still argue whether that's meant as comfort, yes, you too could be chosen, or a warning, don't get too cozy, fate might prank you next. Either way, you suspect the woodcutter is minutes away from becoming folklore's next unwilling volunteer. The air cools as night tucks itself deeper into the forest. The woodcutter stacks the last of the logs with practiced ease, patting the pile almost affectionately, like someone proud of their Spotify playlist. His breath fogs slightly now, the temperature dipping. He kneels, picks up his axe again, and studies the base of a nearby oak. Older, broader, and frankly showing off compared to the rest of the trees. Its bark is knotted, ridges like wrinkles on an ancient face. The man's hand lingers against it, and for a moment you wonder if he's listening to something you can't hear. Woodcutters in European tales are almost never left alone. They stumble upon enchanted stags, or wolves offering cryptic riddles, or trees that aren't as solid as they appear. Did you know that in Germanic folklore, oaks were sacred to the god Donar, Thor to the Norse crowd? People believed lightning sought out oaks because the gods themselves preferred them. In fact, one medieval bishop famously cut down an oak to prove Christianity's dominance, only to have it topple in the perfect direction to split into 4 ready-made beams for a church roof. Talk about divine carpentry. The woodcutter runs his palm down the oak's rough trunk, brow furrowed as if trying to recall a half-forgotten melody. You can almost hear his thoughts, "This one's too big to fell, too old, too sacred." Yet his hand doesn't move. He lingers there like someone standing at a vending machine, knowing they don't have coins, but still tempted to press a button. And then there's that sound. At first, you think it's your own stomach, because, let's face it, you definitely skipped dinner. But no, it comes from inside the oak itself. A low hum, like a cello warming up, or like the tree just cleared its throat and is about to make a very important announcement. The woodcutter jerks his hand back, staring at the trunk. You lean forward instinctively, as if that will help you hear better, which of course it doesn't. Still, your ears pick up something like a whispered syllable curling beneath the bark. Here's a fun tidbit. Some folklorists claim that trees were once thought to be animate beings, housing spirits that could groan, whisper, or even sing. The Celts in particular saw oaks as doorways to the other world. Scholars still bicker about whether these beliefs were literal or symbolic. Maybe both. Maybe people just knew the woods could surprise you, and they liked telling stories that prepared you for that shock. The woodcutter glances around, as though checking if anyone else heard it. But it's only him, and, inconveniently, you. His axe slips slightly in his grip, and for the first time his steady routine falters. He raises his hand again, presses the bark once more, and there it is, a vibration, humming like a quiet engine, deep inside the oak. You know how your phone sometimes buzzes at the worst possible moment, making you leap half a foot? That's what this feels like, except multiplied by the fact that it's a tree vibrating under his palm. He steps back, muttering something under his breath, and you can't help but chuckle quietly. If this were a modern story, he'd already be Googling, tree buzzing what do? But no internet here. Just him, the axe, the ancient oak, and a silence so heavy you can feel it pressing on your ears. His normal, repetitive world has cracked, just slightly, but enough to let the strange seep in. And you know that once it does, nothing will go back to routine again.
The woodcutter lingers before the oak, his hand hovering just shy of touching it again. You can tell he's debating with himself, the way someone debates about whether that suspicious Tupperware in the fridge is still edible. On one hand, curiosity. On the other, the distinct possibility that curiosity is how people in folk tales end up turned into toads. He exhales, shakes his head, and lets his fingers rest against the bark one more time. That's when the whisper sharpens. No longer a vague hum, but a sound threaded with tone, like a voice warming up for choir practice. Low, resonant, a little gravelly. You almost expect the tree to cough politely and ask for a glass of water. The woodcutter jerks back, eyes wide. He isn't the type to scare easily, but you can see how this rattles him. He mutters something about old trees groaning. A perfectly rational explanation, sure, except the tree just pronounced what sounded dangerously like his name. And here's a fun bit of folklore. In many European tales, trees weren't simply backdrops. They were characters, guardians, tricksters, or thresholds. The Brothers Grimm often slipped in moments where characters swear oaths beneath an oak, trusting the tree as witness. Folklorists can't quite agree whether these trees were believed to literally house spirits, or if people just enjoyed dramatizing nature. Either way, it's unsettling when bark whispers syllables you half recognize. The woodcutter leans closer, pressing his ear against the trunk. You can practically hear him thinking, if my neighbors see me like this, I'll never hear the end of it. And then comes the sound again. This time clearer, layered as though voices are overlapping from different directions inside the wood. Words are impossible to catch, yet the tone is unmistakable. Beckoning. Let's pause a second. Imagine if your walls started whispering. You'd probably pack up and move out within the hour. But the woodcutter doesn't run. That's the thing about characters like him. Humble lives breed stubborn bravery. Or maybe it's just exhaustion. When you've spent a lifetime hauling logs, what's a talking tree compared to back pain? He presses both palms against the bark now, almost as if bracing himself. The oak responds, subtle but undeniable. A vibration ripples outward, a pulse under the wood like a heartbeat. The sound rises again, not words but a rhythm, steady and slow. And here's the kicker. It matches the cadence of his axe swings. Chop, pause, chop. The tree has been listening, maybe even mimicking. Folklorists still debate whether this kind of mirroring in old stories was symbolic, suggesting nature listens to us, or if just eerie coincidence. Either way, goosebumps prickle along your arms. The woodcutter stumbles back, almost tripping over his own pile of logs. He looks at his axe, then back at the oak, as though either of them expected one to explain what's going on. Spoiler, neither does. But the whisper swells again, wrapping around the clearing like a hushed choir. You hear it too this time, clearer than before. It isn't language, not exactly, but your ears keep trying to shape it into syllables. One phrase bubbles up again and again, soft but insistent. It might be your imagination, but you'd swear it sounds like, "Come closer." Now, trees in myth are notorious for luring people. Remember the dryads of Greek legend, beautiful tree spirits who could charm mortals without even trying. Or the Norse Yggdrasil, the world tree, its roots connecting realms no mortal was meant to wander. Scholars debate whether these stories arose from literal experiences, strange creaks and groans in the woods, or if they were metaphors for venturing into the unknown. Personally, I'd like to think it was just one unlucky guy leaning too close to a tree with indigestion. The woodcutter wipes his palms on his trousers, looking both shaken and oddly determined. The axe in his hand feels heavier now, as though aware of its own irrelevance. He doesn't lift it. Instead, he takes a cautious step forward, eyes fixed on the oak's gnarled center, where shadows knot into darker shapes. His breath comes slow, measured, like someone preparing to step onto a stage. The whisper grows softer, as though rewarding his approach, almost like a lullaby, low and droning, a tune that seeps into your bones. And you realize this isn't just sound. The air itself vibrates, humming along, and for a moment, you think you feel it in your teeth. Joke's on you, if you thought this night was going to stay normal.
The woodcutter steadies himself before the oak, jaw tight, breath fogging slightly in the chill. The clearing feels suspended, like the moment before a curtain rises. And then it happens. The bark gives beneath his palm. Not in splinters, not in a crumble of rot, but like a door swinging open on hinges so smooth they must have been oiled by centuries. He staggers back, blinking at the impossible. A seam running down the trunk, widening slowly. Inside glimmers a dim golden glow, faint and pulsing, like someone misplaced a lantern in the hollow heart of the tree. You know that split second when your fridge light flickers on and you realize you're about to eat something deeply regrettable? That's the look on his face, except multiplied by the fact that the fridge in question is a centuries-old oak. The woodcutter doesn't rush in. Of course he doesn't. He's the cautious type, the kind who counts his coins twice and ties his boots 3 times. But he doesn't run either. Instead, he stands rooted, staring at that improbable doorway. And here's a historical aside. In medieval folklore, hollow oaks often featured as portals. Some were said to house saints, others demons, and some were guessed really good places to stash contraband wine. Scholars still debate whether these tales emerged from real experiences of stumbling upon animal-dug hollows or from symbolic ideas about entering other realms. The glow inside shifts, swaying gently, like candlelight caught in a draft. The air spilling from the opening is cool, earthy, tinged with a sweetness like mushrooms fried in butter. He takes a cautious sniff, then chuckles to himself, the kind of laugh people make when they're too nervous to stop. You almost expect him to mutter, "Well, that's not suspicious at all." And here's the thing. In stories, doorways always demand a choice. You know it, he knows it. Step through and your life changes. Walk away and you're haunted forever by what you didn't see. Folklorists like to argue whether these thresholds symbolize death, rebirth, or just the plain human itch for curiosity. Personally, I think it's about that universal urge to poke the shiny red button labeled "Do Not Touch." The woodcutter reaches for his axe, not to swing it, but to use it like a walking stick. He presses the head against the opening, testing whether the glow is illusion. The axe slides through without resistance. When he draws it back, the metal shines faintly, as if kissed by moonlight. His eyebrows lift. His heart, you imagine, is pounding hard enough to qualify as percussion for a marching band. He leans closer,
peering into the darkness beyond the glow. Roots curl down like stair rails, spiraling gently into the earth. The light shimmers across them, turning damp bark into bronze veins. It looks less like a hollow and more like a crafted corridor designed by hands or roots that knew someone would one day be curious enough to check. A low groan escapes the tree, not menacing, but oddly companionable. Like it's saying, "Oh, so you finally noticed." He chuckles again, a dry sound, muttering, "I must be tired." And maybe he is. But tired men don't usually find hidden stairways in oaks, do they? Let's be honest. You've seen enough movies to know this is the point where most people shout, "Nope," and leave. But fairy tales are stubborn things. They thrive on people like him. Ordinary, practical, too weary to be cowed by the absurd. He grips his axe tighter, shifts his weight, and takes one slow step forward. The glow paints his boots gold, then his hands, then the determined crease of his face. Behind him, the clearing waits, silent and unchanged. Ahead, the oak breathes faintly, doorway widening just enough to welcome him in. And for the first time all night, the forest no longer feels like it's watching. It feels like it's holding its breath.
The woodcutter ducks his head beneath the arch of bark, shoulders brushing the rough edges as he slips into the oak's hollow. The doorway seems smaller from the outside, but inside it yawns wider, as though the tree has been politely hiding a secret banquet hall in its chest. His boots find the first root step, earth. Not unpleasant, more like that first inhale when you crack open a bag of potting soil, rich, damp, and oddly comforting. The steps spiral down, roots twisting together in an elegant braid. They creak beneath his feet, but instead of snapping, they seem to flex, almost guiding him lower. You follow behind in your mind, careful not to scuff your shoes on something that may or may not be sacred. It's the sort of descent that has you forgetting time. How many steps? 10? 100? By the feel of it, you could be circling all the way down to Australia, though hopefully without the kangaroos waiting at the bottom. And here's your historical tidbit. In many European folk traditions, underground spaces were synonymous with the otherworld. Celtic stories often describe heroes sliding down holes or into caves to meet fae folk, while German legends insisted roots of ancient trees reached secret kingdoms. Scholars still squabble over whether these tales reflected ancient shamanic rituals or whether storytellers were simply trying to explain sinkholes without a degree in geology. The woodcutter's hand trails along the wall as he goes. The surface isn't rough bark anymore, but smoother, polished somehow, like roots that have been worn down by countless palms. He frowns at that, pausing mid-step. Countless palms. He isn't the first, then, and you can almost hear the resigned mutter, "Of course I'm not." A faint glow shimmers below, golden at first, then streaked with green, like lantern light filtered through leaves. It paints the roots with delicate veins of color. He adjusts his grip on the axe and keeps descending. His breath echoes faintly, joining the rustle of shifting soil. The deeper he goes, the more it feels like the air has weight, pressing gently on his chest, not suffocating, but insistent. You know that odd, slightly terrifying feeling when you go down into a basement and the door clicks shut behind you? Multiply that by 10 and add a dash of fairy tale dread. Yet there's something else mixed in. Curiosity. The pull is irresistible, like an unopened text from someone you definitely shouldn't be texting. Finally, the spiral ends. The root stair deposits him onto packed earth, wide and surprisingly smooth, as though someone's broom has been sweeping for centuries. Before him opens a chamber. The ceiling arches high, roots twining like cathedral ribs. Moisture beads on them, dripping occasionally in a slow, steady rhythm that could almost pass for a clock ticking. Here's the quirky fact of the day. Some medieval monks believed underground spaces amplified divine sound. There are records of prayers recited in caves because the echoes seemed to double their power.
Folklorists still debate whether this shaped the way people imagined magical chambers, holy or haunted, depending on who was telling the tale. The woodcutter squints into the glow. Tiny fungi sprout along the walls, caps translucent, each one pulsing with pale light. Together, they form a patchwork of lanterns, scattered like stars across the ground and ceiling. He stares, wide-eyed, then shakes his head as though reminding himself he's just a man and mushrooms don't normally pay the electric bill. A laugh escapes you, soft and nervous. If you've ever stumbled into a room lit only by glow-in-the-dark stickers, you know the vibe. Equal parts magical and mildly ridiculous. Still, the beauty is undeniable. The chamber seems alive, humming faintly, as though the air itself is singing. The woodcutter steps forward, boots crunching on soil that feels softer than it looks. His axe rests loosely at his side, forgotten in awe. He tilts his head, listening, because beneath the hum, there's something else. Another sound, deeper, layered, a rhythm almost like breath. And somewhere in that breath, you sense it. This journey has only just begun.
The woodcutter moves cautiously into the chamber, the glow of fungi brushing his skin in shades of pale emerald and amber. His boots scuff softly, and every sound seems amplified, as if the air itself is eavesdropping. The place feels alive, not in the way a forest feels alive above ground, but in a way that suggests you've stepped into someone's living room without knocking. All around him, mushrooms bloom like lanterns arranged by an eccentric decorator. Their caps glisten with dew, some round as coins, others tall and thin like crooked candlesticks. They flicker, not with fire, but with bioluminescence, pulsing in time with one another. If you squint, the entire chamber looks like a night market built by fungi, with stalls of glowing goods waiting to be admired. You half expect one of them to call out, 2 for 1 nettle soup, tonight only. The woodcutter pauses, his rough hand brushing one glowing cap. It shivers beneath his touch, dimming for a moment before brightening again as though sighing. He pulls his hand back, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like an apology. Funny thing, people often laugh at the idea of apologizing to plants, but in old European traditions this was normal. Folklorists note how peasants whispered thanks before felling a tree or gathering herbs, believing spirits might be listening. Historians still argue whether this was piety, habit, or just good manners in case the oak really was paying attention. The glow reveals more of the chamber. Roots hang down like chandeliers, dripping water that plinks into shallow pools. In one, a silver beetle scuttles, its shell reflecting the light like a tiny disco ball. You nearly laugh, because nothing ruins ancient mystery quite like a bug doing its best Saturday night impression. The woodcutter notices something else. A path. Not carved, not paved, but clear. The fungi grow thickest along the edges, leaving a dark ribbon down the middle, as though guiding him forward. He shifts his axe, squaring his shoulders. The man may be bewildered, but he knows better than to ignore directions from glowing mushrooms. As he follows the path, the hum in the chamber deepens. At first, you think it's just your ears adjusting. But no, it's real. The sound comes from ahead, layered and resonant, like dozens of voices singing a single long note. It's soothing, strangely so, the kind of drone that makes you feel drowsy. You could nap right here on the soft soil if not for the nagging worry you'd wake up covered in mushrooms. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Norse myths, the idea of sound shaping the world runs deep. The word galder referred to magical chanting, believed to alter reality itself. Scholars still debate whether such chants were sung in caves or sacred groves to enhance their echo. Listening now, you can imagine why. The voices here feel less like echoes and more like the chamber itself is joining in. The woodcutter frowns, stopping mid-step. He tilts his head. For a moment, you think he's about to turn back, admit he's wandered too far into the absurd. But instead, he mutters something wry, a half-sarcastic grumble. Well, if it's supper you want, I hope you like turnips. The words fall flat in the glow, but they steady him. Humor, after all, has always been humanity's favorite shield against the unknown.
He keeps walking deeper into the chamber as the fungi dimming behind him and the path ahead glows brighter. The hum grows stronger, vibrating through the soil, through his boots, up his bones. You feel it too, a low thrum in your chest, like standing too close to a speaker at a concert, except instead of bass-heavy pop, it's the lull of a world that's been humming long before you arrived. And somewhere in that glow, in that endless drone, you sense the first true welcome of the oak's hidden heart.
The path curves gently until the chamber opens wider, roots arching like ribs overhead. At the center waits a figure, not seated, not lurking, but simply there, as though the space was built to house him. The woodcutter freezes, his axe instinctively rising a fraction, though not in threat, more like a shield he knows won't matter if things get serious. The figure is tall, but not towering. His body seems woven of bark and sinew, skin etched with grain like tree rings. A face emerges from the wood, half human, half trunk, with eyes that glow faintly like embers banked in ash. His beard is a tumble of moss, and where hair should be, branches curl into delicate twigs. You'd think it would look terrifying, but instead it's oddly dignified, like a retired professor who spends too much time in the garden. The figure inclines his head, creaking faintly like a hinge long unused. When he speaks, the sound isn't just voice, it's wind through leaves, water through roots, distant thunder folded into words. And yet what he says is disarmingly casual. "You've taken your time." The woodcutter blinks. His lips twitch, torn between reverence and a sarcastic retort. Finally, he mutters, "Well, I was busy." It's such an ordinary answer that you can't help but grin. In tales, mortals often bow or tremble. Here stands a man who treats a tree spirit like a neighbor who's caught him late for dinner. And here's your historical anchor. European folklore is rich with tree guardians. The Greeks had dryads, bound to oaks, living and dying with them. Norse legends whispered of vatir, land spirits who punished disrespect and rewarded kindness. Folklorists still argue whether these beings were believed literal or if they were poetic ways to remind people not to trash their environment. Either way, standing here now, you'd swear this guardian is no metaphor. The woodcutter shifts uncomfortably, his voice low. "What do you want with me?" The guardian chuckles, and the chamber shakes faintly with it. Dust sifts from roots above, drifting like lazy snow. "Want? You speak as though you're a coin in a merchant's hand." "No, I've been listening." The woodcutter frowns, gripping the axe tighter. "Listening? To your rhythm, to the beat of steel on wood, to the sighs you don't let out when your back aches. You've been knocking, every day, without knowing." It's a strange thought that his daily labor, simple and repetitive, might have been a conversation all along. You wonder how many hours of chopping wood it takes before a tree decides you're worth talking to. Probably more than your gym attendance record, if we're being honest. The guardian tilts his head, twigs rattling faintly. Most who find this place arrive by accident. But you've been steady. You've carved yourself into the rhythm of this forest. So the door opened. The woodcutter swallows. He doesn't look frightened, more unsettled, as if realizing his routine has been less private than he thought. Imagine finding out your morning shower songs had been broadcast to the neighborhood all along. Scholars debate endlessly whether spirits in folklore sought out humans or humans invented them out of longing. Perhaps both. Tonight, at least, it feels like a meeting halfway. The guardian leans forward, voice dropping lower, softer. "And now you must choose whether to keep listening." The woodcutter's mouth opens, shuts, then curls into a faint smirk. "If I say no, do I just wake up at home with a headache?" The spirit actually chuckles again, roots shifting beneath his feet.
If only it were that simple. The woodcutter sighs, rubbing his temples, then lowers the axe. Fine, I'll listen. And with those words, the hum in the chamber deepens, as though the forest itself approves.
The air feels heavier now, but not in a suffocating way, more like a blanket being tucked around you. The guardian straightens, and his branch-like hair rustles softly as though a breeze slips through, though you feel none on your cheek. He gestures toward the far side of the chamber, and the roots there begin to shift. What looked like a wall pulls back, revealing another passage, this one glowing with faint green light.
"You've carried your axe as a burden," the guardian says, "but it can be something more, if you wish." The woodcutter snorts. "What, you're going to turn it into a sword? A magic staff? Maybe a frying pan that never burns porridge?" He doesn't quite mean the joke, but humor is his way of keeping the ground steady. The guardian ignores the sarcasm with a patience that suggests he's seen 1,000 men try similar defenses. "Everything you carry carries you in return," he says simply. And here's where the folklore slides in. In Norse myth, trees weren't just backdrops. The world tree, Yggdrasil, held all 9 realms together. In Slavic tales, axes were ritually blessed before cutting down a sacred grove. Historians still squabble over whether villagers believed the tools themselves gained spirits, or if that was just metaphorical. Tonight, though, in this subterranean hall, you can feel the axe thrumming faintly in the woodcutter's grip, like it's paying attention for the first time. He runs his thumb along the worn handle. He thinks about the years of calluses, the blisters that toughened into scars, the timber he split to keep his family warm. Suddenly, the axe doesn't feel like just a hunk of iron and wood. It feels like a diary. Every mark, a memory. Every dent, a story. "Walk with me," the guardian says. His voice is still a low rumble, but softer now, almost coaxing. Together they step into the green glow. The roots twist above like cathedral arches, and underfoot the floor isn't dirt anymore, it's polished wood, smooth and gleaming, like the inside of a living tree. The woodcutter can hear faint whispers rising and falling as though hundreds of voices are talking just out of reach. He mutters under his breath. Feels like walking inside a drum. "Close," the guardian replies with what might almost be a smile. "You're inside memory." And here's a little tidbit. In Celtic lore, oaks were said to store ancestral spirits. Cutting one wasn't just felling a tree, it was cutting into memory, into lineage. Some folklorists argue that's why Druids revered groves so fiercely. Others think the symbolism was more about politics. Control the sacred grove, control the story. Either way, you get the sense the woodcutter has walked into a library, only instead of books, the shelves are living, breathing wood. He pauses, tilting his head. Those voices, what are they saying? The guardian lifts a hand, and the whispers hush. They're asking if you're ready. The woodcutter swallows hard. He thinks about turning back, about claiming this was all too much. But then he remembers the door under the oak and the pull that led him here, and the way his heart has been both restless and weary for years. He sighs and says, "I've come this far." The voices rise again, not in words, but in a warm rush of sound, like a crowd exhaling in unison. It washes over him, seeps into him, and for a moment you can feel it too. A deep, grounding stillness, the sense that you've tapped into something far older than yourself. The woodcutter looks at the guardian, who meets his gaze steadily. Then you'll hear their story. The path bends once more, and ahead glimmers a doorway of light, brighter than anything so far. The woodcutter tightens his grip on the axe, takes a steadying breath, and steps forward.
The doorway of light isn't harsh. It's the kind of brightness that makes you squint but doesn't hurt, like morning sun filtering through thin curtains. The woodcutter steps closer, and as he does, the axe in his hand hums again, faint but insistent, like a cat purring. He mutters, "If this thing starts talking to me, I'm leaving." The guardian doesn't answer. He merely lays a branch-like hand against the glowing frame. The doorway ripples as though it's made of liquid, and the air smells faintly of sap and rain. With a grunt of courage, the woodcutter pushes through. On the other side, the world has changed. He's no longer underground, but standing in an open grove where the trees are impossibly tall, their branches lost in mist. The ground beneath him is carpeted in moss that muffles every step. It feels like walking on a mattress, only without the springs poking your back. He looks around wide-eyed. So what is this? Your garden? Or did I fall asleep on my chopping block again? The guardian's voice drifts like wind through the leaves. This is the between. Not past, not present, just memory waiting to be heard. In myth, spaces like this are common. The Greeks had asphodel meadows where ordinary souls wandered. The Celts spoke of liminal groves where heroes met spirits. Scholars still argue whether these were meant as literal destinations or dreamscapes for storytelling. Either way, you've landed in one now. Dreamy, shifting, more suggestion than stone. The woodcutter notices something odd. In the trunks of the trees, faint images shimmer, scenes of people at work, children laughing, animals grazing. When he steps closer, one of the images sharpens. A farmer sowing seeds in a field. The farmer looks tired, bent, but there's pride in the rhythm of his movement. Are these lives? The woodcutter whispers. The guardian's voice answers from everywhere and nowhere. They are echoes of those who came before. The oak remembers all who rested in its shade, all who cut from its branches, all who gave to its soil. The woodcutter runs a hand over the moss. It's cool and damp, but when he looks at his palm, he swears he sees tiny flickers of light clinging there, like fireflies too small to catch. He shakes his hand out nervously. "This is ridiculous," he mutters, though his voice lacks conviction. "I cut trees, I don't talk to them." And here's a quirky historical tidbit. In 18th century Europe, some foresters actually held ceremonies before cutting certain oaks, pouring ale or breadcrumbs at their roots. Scholars disagree whether that was superstition or just an excuse to throw a mini picnic, but the idea of treating trees as witnesses has been around longer than logbooks. The woodcutter finds himself walking deeper into the grove. Each tree holds different memories: laughter, grief, triumph, defeat. He passes a trunk showing a woman singing lullabies to her child, then another where men argue over boundary stones, fists raised but never landing. He stops before one particular oak. Inside its trunk glimmers a scene too familiar, a younger version of himself swinging his axe, sweat pouring, jaw tight with determination. He remembers that day. It was the first time he felled a tree on his own. He'd been proud, though his arms ached for weeks. The younger version fades, and in its place he sees his wife sitting by the fire, mending clothes. The woodcutter's throat tightens. He reaches out, but his hand meets only bark. "Why are you showing me this?" he demands softly.
"To remind you," the guardian answers, "that you are part of the memory too." The woodcutter closes his eyes. For the first time, he realizes this isn't about finding treasure or hidden power. It's about connection, seeing himself not as a man separate from the forest, but as someone woven into its story. The woodcutter opens his eyes again, steadier now. "So what happens if I keep walking?" The guardian's voice carries on the wind, gentle but certain. "Then you'll learn where memory becomes choice." The mossy path stretches deeper into the grove, curving into the mist. The woodcutter takes a long breath, squares his shoulders, and steps forward. The mist thickens as you keep walking. It curls low along the mossy ground, hiding your boots until you feel like you're floating. The woodcutter waves his hand in front of his face, muttering, "If I trip over a root in this fog, I'm suing somebody." Which is funny, since suing a mystical tree spirit is not really covered in medieval law. The guardian's presence lingers behind you, like a sound you almost hear but can't. You can sense it watching, guiding, though it doesn't speak. Instead, the forest seems to answer for it. Every so often, a branch sways without wind, or a bird call echoes without any bird in sight. Ahead, the mist thins just enough to reveal a circle of stones set in the earth. They're arranged evenly, ancient and moss-covered, like the ruins of some forgotten gathering place. The woodcutter frowns. "Great, I've walked straight into a fairy committee meeting." Which is funny, since suing a mystical tree spirit is not really covered in medieval law. The guardian's presence lingers behind you, like a sound you almost hear but can't. You can sense it watching, guiding, though it doesn't speak. Instead, the forest seems to answer for it. Every so often, a branch sways without wind, or a bird call echoes without any bird in sight. Ahead, the mist thins just enough to reveal a circle of stones set in the earth. They're arranged evenly, ancient and moss-covered, like the ruins of some forgotten gathering place. The woodcutter frowns. "Great, I've walked straight into a fairy committee meeting." And you're not far off. In Celtic folklore, stone circles were often seen as places where mortals might accidentally wander into the other world, sometimes vanishing for years, sometimes reappearing unchanged, sometimes coming back aged a century in a single night. Scholars still debate whether these tales were meant to explain time's strangeness or simply to scare people away from trespassing. Either way, stumbling into one was rarely considered a casual afternoon stroll. The woodcutter steps closer. Between the stones, faint lights hover, like fireflies, but slower, deliberate. They drift in patterns, weaving around the circle's edge. When he squints, he realizes the lights aren't random. They form shapes. Hands clasping, figures bowing, people sharing bread. The circle is a memory of community, etched in light. He clears his throat. "All right, if anyone in this magical stone club is listening, I just came here by accident. Please don't turn me into a goat." No one answers. Instead, the lights swirl faster. The air hums low and steady until it feels like standing beside a giant harp string. The woodcutter's chest tightens, not from fear exactly, but from awe. It's like the grove itself is singing. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some Norse legends, trees and stones could actually store sound, replaying voices long after the speaker was gone. It's an odd idea. Imagine shouting at a boulder and then hearing your great-grandchild complain about it centuries later. Folklorists can't agree whether this belief was poetic metaphor or if people genuinely thought rocks worked like record players. Either way, it fits right in here. The woodcutter edges into the circle. The moment he does, the mist clears just enough to reveal figures, hazy, translucent, like smoke rising from a fire. They're villagers, men, women, children, all going about ordinary tasks, carrying baskets, laughing, arguing, comforting. They move as though unaware of his presence, repeating their daily motions. The woodcutter whispers, "These are my people." Not just his neighbors, though some faces are familiar. These are villagers across generations, ancestors whose names have faded. They worked the same soil, felled the same trees, sang the same songs around the fire. One figure, an old woman with a shawl, pauses, her head tilting as if she hears him. The woodcutter swallows, heart pounding. He knows it's only a memory, but still her eyes seem to meet his. She lifts her hand, not in warning, but in blessing, before dissolving back into mist. The lights dim. The circle falls silent again. The woodcutter steps back, dazed. He runs his hand over his face. Well, that's one way to meet the in-laws. His voice steadies as he turns back to the mossy path. The guardian finally speaks, voice like rustling branches. "Now you see, the forest holds not only your labor, but your kin, your village, your story. The oak remembers all." The woodcutter nods slowly. For the first time, he doesn't feel like a stranger in this place. He feels rooted. Still, his practical side pipes up. "This is all very moving, but I still don't know where this path actually goes." And right on cue, the mist parts ahead, revealing the faint glow of another doorway. This one larger, pulsing with a softer golden light, like candle flames reflected on water. He sighs, adjusts the axe on his shoulder, and mutters, "Fine, one more door. What's the worst that could happen? Don't answer that." Then he steps forward into whatever waits next.
The golden glow ahead shimmers as if it's alive, bending and pulsing with every step you take. The woodcutter squints, hand half shielding his eyes. "Great. Either I've found enlightenment or I'm walking into the world's fanciest lantern." As he gets closer, he realizes it isn't a lantern at all. It's water, an underground spring bubbling up beneath a smooth arch of stone. The glow comes from the water itself, radiating a warmth that feels like stepping into sunlight after weeks of rain. You kneel beside him. The surface reflects your faces, but not as you expect. The woodcutter looks younger, the lines of exhaustion smoothed away, his eyes brighter. Well, you still look sleep-deprived, but at least your hair isn't doing that awkward thing it usually does. He dips his hand into the spring. The water feels cool, yet somehow warming, like holding snow that refuses to melt. A ripple spreads outward, and with it, images appear. Not memories this time, but possibilities. He sees himself teaching his daughter to swing an axe, showing her which trees can be felled without harming the forest. He sees himself planting seedlings, laughing with neighbors, even, oddly enough, hosting a midsummer dance where he's wearing suspiciously fancy boots. In medieval folklore, springs and wells often served as portals to fate. Think of the Brothers Grimm tale Mother Hully, where a girl falls into a well and emerges in another world. Scholars still argue whether these stories were meant to warn kids about wandering near deep water, or if they symbolize something larger, the unknown depths of choice, the chance that even the most ordinary path could lead somewhere extraordinary. The woodcutter stares at the spring, brows furrowed. So what, this is like the world's first motivational TED Talk, but with more hydration? You can't help but laugh. And yes, in a way, he's right. The water shows not just what is, but what could be. He cups some of it in his hands and drinks. His shoulders loosen, the constant ache of years of labor easing. He exhales, and for the first time in a long time, it doesn't sound like a man sighing under the weight of endless work. It sounds like relief. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Norse myths, there's a well called Mimisbrunner, guarded by the severed head of a wise god. Odin himself gave up an eye for a sip from its waters, hoping for knowledge. Now, whether you'd trade an eyeball for wisdom is your business, but it's interesting how many cultures tied water to insight. Folklorists still can't agree whether that spring was a literal well, a poetic metaphor, or just proof that gods had questionable bargaining strategies. The woodcutter looks at you, water still dripping from his chin. I don't know if this means I'm supposed to change my whole life or just drink more fluids. He chuckles, then gazes back at the glowing pool. But I do know one thing. I want to carry this back. Not the water itself, it would just spill, but the memory of how it feels. The guardian's voice stirs again, softer now. Carry it in your choices. Every axe stroke, every seed planted, every word spoken. These are the waters you leave for those who come after. The woodcutter nods. He pats the stone rim of the spring like it's an old friend, then stands. His boots squelch slightly in the moss, breaking the solemn moment. He sighs. All right, mystical life lesson absorbed. Back to walking. As he turns away, the glow doesn't fade. It follows faintly, a lingering golden sheen woven into his steps, as though the spring refuses to let him go entirely. The path ahead narrows into a tunnel of roots, twisting and curling like the inside of a cathedral carved from living wood. The light of the spring fades behind you, but the memory of its warmth lingers in your chest. The woodcutter straightens, his voice lighter than before. All right, if the next stop is a singing goat, I'm ready. And together you step deeper into the root-woven tunnel, waiting to see what the oak will offer next. The tunnel of roots carries you onward like a slow, winding stream, each step muffled by soft earth. The woodcutter brushes his hand along the walls as though he's walking through the ribs of a sleeping giant. Feels like I'm inside a loaf of bread, he mutters, if bread were alive, damp, and judging me. Ahead, the roots begin to weave themselves into shapes, arches, spirals, even something that looks suspiciously like a chair. But as you get closer, you realize they're not random designs. They're letters. Whole words, in fact, curling in an ancient script you don't recognize. The woodcutter squints, tilting his head like a pigeon trying to solve algebra. So, is this tree writing me a love letter, or is it cursing my extended family? You lean closer. The letters shimmer faintly, rearranging themselves as if eager to be understood. Suddenly, the meaning settles in, not through logic, but through sensation. The words aren't telling what will happen, they're asking a question. Which story will you leave behind? The woodcutter lets out a low whistle. Great. Existential therapy session, courtesy of bark. In medieval monasteries, scribes sometimes drew trees in the margins of manuscripts, their branches curling into words that hinted at knowledge both sacred and secret. Historians still debate whether these arboreal scripts were meant to be literal teaching devices or more of a visual prayer. Either way, the idea that trees carry messages is older than any book. You see it echoed in Norse Yggdrasil, the world tree, where runes were said to dangle like ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. The woodcutter runs his hand over one of the glowing words. His rough fingers don't snag, the letters ripple like water. He frowns. Which story will I leave behind? Well, I'd like it to be less tired guy who chopped wood until his back gave out, and more, I don't know, a fellow who actually danced at his daughter's wedding. He pauses, then grins. Though honestly, legendary sleeper of naps has a nice ring too. You laugh, but the words keep shifting, not in disapproval, but in curiosity, as though the tree is saying,
You get to choose. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some Slavic folktales, people believed carving your name into a tree bound your spirit to it. Sometimes that was protective, like an eternal friendship pact with the forest. But sometimes it meant your fate was no longer entirely your own. Folklorists can't agree whether these stories came from genuine belief or were simply warnings to stop people vandalizing trees out of boredom. The woodcutter straightens, suddenly serious. He don't think I want to carve anything here. Feels disrespectful. Besides, my handwriting is terrible. Instead, he closes his eyes and speaks softly. My story is this. I worked hard, but I learned to rest. I raised my child to be strong, but also kind, and when I had the choice, I chose care over haste. The words ripple again, brighter this time, then fade back into the roots as though satisfied. You feel the tunnel shift beneath your feet, the air lightening. A path opens, leading upward, glowing faintly like dawn seen through fog. The woodcutter exhales, shoulders squared but relaxed. All right, mysterious arboreal therapist, message received. Time to see what's next. And with that, you both step toward the rising glow, the quiet hum of the oak's question still echoing in your chest.
The path upward feels less like a tunnel and more like a slow climb through memory. Each step carries the faint sound of rustling leaves, even though the air is still. The woodcutter lumbers behind you, muttering, "If this ends with me waking up and realizing I'm just late for work, I'll be so disappointed." The glow ahead widens into a dome-like chamber. At its center lies a shallow pool of water, clear as glass. But instead of reflecting your faces, it shows scenes, flashes of lives already lived. A girl skipping rope in a cobblestone alley. A farmer balancing 2 buckets of milk, smiling at nothing in particular. A baker pulling a tray of bread from the oven while humming a hymn. The woodcutter leans over, squinting. Oh, good, a puddle of nosiness. Just what I needed. Yet, as you both watch, the pool shifts again. This time, it shows the woodcutter himself, younger, swinging an axe that's far too big for his frame. He misses the tree entirely and stumbles backward. Somewhere in the background, someone laughs, a memory he'd clearly forgotten. His shoulders sink. That was me at 15. My uncle never let me hear the end of it. He chuckles softly. Funny though, back then I thought I'd be a failure if I couldn't chop wood right. Turns out failure is just the warm-up act. Water pools like this appear in countless old stories. The Greeks had the mirror of Nemesis, said to reveal not your face, but your true self. Celtic tales told of wells that showed visions, but only to those who offered something precious. And then there's the ongoing scholarly squabble. Were these seeing waters meant to encourage actual prophecy, or were they allegories for reflection, literally and spiritually? Historians can't seem to decide. The woodcutter dips his hand into the pool. Ripples scatter across the visions, blurring them into streaks of color. He pulls his hand back quickly, shaking off the droplets. Great, now I've probably doomed us to 7 years of wet socks. But the water doesn't punish. Instead, it rearranges, showing something unexpected. You, or rather the sense of you, walking alongside him, listening, sharing the silence. The woodcutter blinks hard. Didn't expect to see that. Guess even mysterious puddles know when company matters. Here's the quirky fact. In some corners of medieval Europe, people believed that looking into water at twilight revealed not just spirits, but also future companions. It wasn't always about romance. Sometimes it was a friend, a guide, even a rival. Folklorists debate whether this was superstition or simply a poetic way of saying we find ourselves in others. The woodcutter clears his throat. Well, that's enough staring at puddles for me. Feels like we just broke into history's least exciting art gallery. Still, As you both turn away, there's a lingering softness in his expression. He looks lighter, as though he's been allowed to forgive himself for the awkward boy with the oversized axe. The glow brightens near the far wall of the chamber, where an archway of twisted roots waits. Beyond it, you glimpse movement, shadows shifting, voices faint but melodic, like laughter carried on a breeze. The woodcutter lifts his axe, not in defense, but more like a walking stick. "All right," he says with a grin, "let's see who's laughing now." And together you step through the arch into whatever waits beyond, the echo of the pool still rippling in your thoughts.
The arch of roots bends and widens until you find yourself standing in what feels like an underground meadow. The ceiling above isn't stone at all. It's a canopy of glowing leaves hanging down in shimmering curtains. Each leaf glows faintly green or gold, like fireflies too tired to flutter away. The air is warm, sweet, touched by the faint smell of honey. The woodcutter lets out a low whistle. "Well, this beats the usual damp cave with bats aesthetic. 10 out of 10. Wood picnic here." But you're not alone. Figures emerge from between the glowing curtains. Tall, slim shapes with eyes that catch light like polished silver. Their steps are noiseless, as though they don't disturb the earth at all. Elves, or something close enough to the legends. One raises a hand in greetings, the gesture neither threatening nor overly formal. "Travelers," the figure says softly, though the words reach you without sound crossing the air. "You've followed the oak's dream far." The woodcutter, never one for elaborate speeches, just nods. "Yes, and if it's all the same to you, I'd love a sandwich." The elves exchange glances that may or may not be amusement. One finally gestures toward a stone table, already laid with fruit, bread, and pitchers of something glowing faintly. "Refresh yourselves," the voice whispers in your thoughts. As you sit, you recall how elves and fair folk have appeared across countless traditions. The Norse spoke of Alfar, radiant beings associated with fertility and the hidden earth. In Celtic lore, there were the Aoshi, living beneath mounds, sometimes benevolent, sometimes troublesome. Folklorists still argue whether these tales describe nature spirits, half-remembered ancestors, or simply the human longing for neighbors who live just out of reach. The woodcutter grabs a piece of bread, sniffs it suspiciously, then shrugs and eats. "Not poisoned, or at least not immediately. I'll let you know in 20 minutes. The elves don't seem offended. If anything, their eyes soften with something like pity, as though mortals' clumsy jokes amuse them endlessly. One of them leans closer to you, their voice threading directly into your mind. "The oak chose you because you listen. Few hear its dreaming roots anymore." The woodcutter raises an eyebrow. "So the tree was interviewing us because I didn't bring a resume?" The elf tilts their head, perhaps not grasping the humor, perhaps choosing not to. Instead, they extend a hand, palm up. In it lies a small seed, no larger than a fingernail, glowing faintly gold. "Carry this above when you leave. Plant it where the soil feels forgotten." Here's a quirky tidbit. In medieval Germany, it was said that planting an acorn from a lightning-struck oak near your house would protect it from storms. Some even claimed it could ensure fertility or prosperity. Historians still debate whether these practices were pagan remnants or just superstition woven into farming life. The woodcutter studies the seed, then pockets it carefully, for once without a sarcastic comment. You sense he feels the weight of it, heavier than its size suggests. When the meal is done, the elves rise in unison, silent as shadows. One gestures toward a sloping path lined with faintly glowing stones. Your journey is not yet ended, but you carry what you need. The woodcutter stretches, pats his stomach, and whispers, "If this ends with more stairs, I'm writing a complaint letter." But he follows, and so do you,
into the narrowing passage lit by stones that hum faintly, as though singing under their breath. Ahead lies the final ascent, and the faintest promise of dawn seeping through the cracks of the world above.
The path climbs gently at first, then steepens until you're leaning forward, palms brushing the stone as you steady yourself. The glowing stones thin out, replaced by threads of dawn light filtering through cracks in the earth. Each step feels like rising out of a dream that doesn't quite want to release you. The woodcutter huffs beside you. I knew it. Stairs. The elves are pranksters with better lighting. He grips the glowing seed in his pocket, muttering, If this sprouts into a vine that drags me up here, I won't complain. When you finally push through the last narrow bend, the ceiling above splits open. Cool morning air spills across your face, sharp and fresh, carrying the smell of dew-soaked grass. You step out into the forest clearing beneath the very oak you entered, only now its branches blaze with the rising sun. Birds chatter lazily as if to say, We kept watch while you were gone. The woodcutter squints, blinking like someone adjusting to reality after watching 3 movies in a row. So, we're back, alive, and weirdly full of fairy bread. Not the worst night. You glance at the oak's trunk. The doorway is gone, its roots tucked neatly back into the soil, no trace of the passage below. Only the faint hum of the seed in the woodcutter's pocket reminds you it wasn't all a dream. Here's a curious fact to anchor the moment. Many cultures saw oaks as bridges between worlds. The Celts considered them sacred, believing druids gathered mistletoe only from oak branches. In Slavic folklore, the oak was linked to Perun, god of thunder, a tree that could channel divine power. Scholars still debate whether such stories arose because oaks attract lightning or because their sheer size demanded reverence. Either way, the oak has always stood at the seam of myth and earth. The woodcutter stretches, yawns, and pats your shoulder. Next time, remind me to take the shortcut through the meadow with actual chairs. My knees are writing complaint letters. He laughs, a sound more relieved than humorous. Together you begin the slow walk back through the waking forest, the sky above shifting from soft gold to the pale blue of morning. Each step feels grounded now, the weight of the journey pressing lightly, but not heavily, as though the forest itself thanks you for listening. And perhaps that's the real treasure, the reminder that even the most ordinary path can open into wonder if you're quiet enough to notice the whispers beneath your feet.
Now let the story slow, as gently as a breath released. The forest fades to a hush, the oak's roots folding back into silence, leaving only the rhythm of your steps and the soft pull of rest. The woodcutter's laughter lingers faintly, a warm echo drifting away into the distance, until even that becomes part of the stillness. Imagine yourself lying beneath that ancient oak, its branches arcing above like a protective canopy. The leaves stir faintly in the dawn breeze, each movement soft as the flutter of a lullaby. You close your eyes, and the sounds of the waking forest, birds, breeze, the gentle creak of wood, melt into one continuous hum. Your body grows heavier, each limb sinking comfortably, as though the earth itself is holding you. Thoughts drift slowly, like leaves carried downstream, each one floating further until only quiet remains. The glowing seed, the hidden meadow, the silver-eyed elves all dissolve into a soft blur, their shapes fading until they are no more than a warm glow in memory. Breath by breath, you settle.
Your chest rises and falls with the same rhythm as the oak's dreaming roots. You are safe. You are quiet. You are already halfway into sleep. So, as the story closes, let your mind slip deeper into the spaces where dreams take root, into the calm beneath the surface of thought, into rest that is gentle, timeless, and whole. Good night, traveler. May the oak guard your sleep, and may your dreams be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind.